Hi, I'm David Hogg.
And I'm Aaron Gartlan. Welcome to the Legal View. Tonight our guest is Houston County Circuit Court Clerk Carla Woodall.
We're going to be talking with Carla about the duties of the Circuit Clerk's office and everything that goes into running the courthouse.
American law is complex and not always easily understood, so a little help and advice can go a long way. The attorneys of Hogg and Gartlan Law Firm in Dothan present Legal View.
The Legal View with Hogg and Gartlan.
Carla, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
And Carla, you've lived in Dothan a long time, haven't you?
My whole life. We'll never leave.
Well, tell us a little bit about what it's like growing up in Dothan and how you came to be the circuit clerk.
I was born and raised in Dothan. I graduated from Northview many years ago. I won't tell when. And I'm married to Bob Woodall. My husband and I, we have together 4 children, Brandon, Jamie, Elizabeth Grace, and Robert. They're 22, 19, and then the twins are 10. And prior to being circuit clerk, I was a court reporter for 15 years. I went to school in Montgomery at a private school, graduated, came back to Dothan, started my own firm, did freelance court reporting work for about 4.5 years, and then was hired by the state and was at the courthouse for about 10 years and then decided to run for circuit clerk, and here I am.
And you've been circuit clerk for how many years now?
4.5.
We stay busy here in Houston County, don't we, in our court system?
We do. Everybody sort of forgets that the lower little section of Alabama is a lot more busy than they give us credit for. We a lot of times get lost in LA, lower Alabama, but we are tremendously busy.
Well now, Carla, we know your office maintains, or one of the things that your office does is maintain all of the court files.
Correct.
And I know from being down in your office, that's a lot of files, and that's only part of what you do. Would you tell the viewers, what your responsibilities are and what what you do day in and day out?
I have a staff of 20 employees right now, thank goodness. And every piece of paper that comes into that courthouse pertaining to a file comes through my office. We process that paperwork, we send it out where it needs to go, whether it's to the judge or to defendants or to plaintiffs or witnesses. We handle all of that. We handle all of the money concerning cases, the filing fees, the dispersing of money to all the different state agencies, to the general fund, to victims. We handle the restitution money as well. We serve all the subpoenas, not serve, but we process all the subpoenas to be served. We handle jury selection procedures. We summons jurors and handle everything. So we handle a tremendous amount of cases. In fact, when you break it down, we have 9 different divisions within the clerk's office. And there's a total of over 22,000 cases filed in Houston County each year. Small claims handles about 4,700, and the district civil division, which is actually in with small claims, they're about 1,500 a year. Probably our largest caseload is in traffic cases. We handle about 12,000 cases a year, which is a lot of traffic tickets. The circuit civil division handles about 1,500. And then, sadly, our domestic relations, they handle about 700 a year. So we handle a tremendous, tremendous amount of cases. District criminal and circuit criminal, we have a district attorney that believes in processing a lot of cases, and our district criminal is about 3,000 and circuit criminal is about 1,500.
Now tell the viewers the difference between district and circuit. You're talking about these divisions. Generally, what's the difference?
Small claims in district civil is a civil side that's a lower level court in the district courts. A lot of it depends on how much of a judgment you're asking for as to where the case goes. Anything under 1,500 is in the small claims division, and that requires a lower filing fee as well. And then you have your district civil cases, and then anything over 50,000, anything over 3,000 is in your circuit civil division. Same with district criminal. A case starts in the lower courts in district court, and then once, if it's a felony and it's indicted, then it goes on to circuit cases. A lot of the misdemeanors, they stay in the district court level, And traffic cases are also in the district court level.
And in district court, you don't get a jury trial, right?
Correct. It is a bench trial with the judge, and where circuit court, you do have a jury. If it's a civil case, you actually have a choice whether you want a jury trial or a bench trial with a circuit judge. And there's an additional fee if you do ask for a jury demand.
You know, the jury trial, and you just talked about how this will all affect the public, and it's something that, David and I as lawyers, and I know you as the clerk, realize how very vital to our democracy the right to a jury trial is. And you've
Correct.
mentioned that in certain cases, our Constitution and our system of government is set up to give the public, to give the individual citizen the right to a jury trial.
Right.
And, some of those cases might be car wreck cases or, wrongful death type cases, the more serious cases that wind up in circuit court
Right.
with a jury demand attached to it. So it sounds like that some of these things may very well have a direct impact on the right to a jury trial.
It will. Part of the staffing cuts, we were also told we had to reduce the number of jury trials that we actually have each year. Where Houston County used to have 16 terms, we will now only have 12 terms a year. Unfortunately, that means if we're not having as many terms, cases don't go to trial as quickly. The backlog is going to continue to grow. And what's incredible is in the state of Alabama, we do not have the statistics yet for 2010, but for 2009, based upon the number of circuit judges that we have, the judges available to try cases, Houston County tried more per judge than any other circuit in the state of Alabama, which is incredible.
Now, Carla, were the majority of those trials criminal jury trials or civil jury trials?
The majority of those were criminal. Oftentimes what happens is, in civil cases, the judges set their docket and everything goes out. Civil dockets now go out 45 days prior to a jury term. So once the civil attorneys find out, okay, this case is now going to trial, that speeds up the communication among the attorneys. And often what happens is the week before the trial is set, or even the day of, the attorneys meet and a lot of settlements are then entered. Settlements usually do not come until you get a trial date. So yes, we had tons and tons of trials, but majority of those were criminal because the civils did settle.
Well, and Carla, you raised a great point, and that's one of the things that I'm glad you shared with the viewers, because that is one of the vital reasons that a jury trial is so important, because it forces both sides in a case to look at it and finally make a decision about how the case is going to be resolved.
And Carla, with jury trials being so important, tell our viewers how a jury is selected.
Well, it's interesting. That's a question I'm asked a lot. Where do we get our jurors from? And about 45 days prior to a term, we actually make a request through the Administrative Office of Courts for however many jurors we need. In Houston County, we usually call, which is surprising, 625 jurors for one term of court.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing how many jurors we actually call. So we send that request in, and then the Administrative Office of Courts actually mails out the little cards for you to get your summons. And it comes from the driver's license and voter registration. Oftentimes I have people say, oh, I don't vote because I don't want to be called for jury service. Well, it doesn't matter if you vote or if you drive, you're going to get called. And so that goes out, and then our phones start ringing with all the excuses of people trying to get out of jury service. And it is amazing some of the things that we hear.
Well, when it's time for them to show up and they come to the courthouse, these people who may serve on a jury, what happens then?
They come in, they go through court security, they are brought into one big large room, and they are actually checked in. And I have an assistant there with me, and we start that process of marking off who's there and everything. Then we take everybody upstairs to the 4th floor courtroom, and we call roll. And everybody wonders, well, you've just checked everybody in, why are you having to call roll? You wouldn't believe how many people get lost from the first floor to the fourth floor, and we've got to make sure that everybody is there, because once you get there, you have to be sworn in, and we want to make sure that everybody was sworn in for their service.
Well, everybody who's ever been that far knows that then they start asking questions. The judge asks a lot of questions at that first level. And what's that about?
It's to make sure that you are generally qualified, and it's very simple questions, things like, are you a resident of Houston County, or are you over 19 years of age? Can you read and speak the English language? Do you have any physical or emotional or mental problems that would prohibit you from serving? Have you ever been convicted of a crime of moral turpitude? Not every felony is a crime of moral turpitude. So all of those questions, those general questions, are asked, and jurors have an option. They can either answer out loud, or they can come up privately to the bench and tell the judge in private their responses.
To keep from embarrassing them.
Correct, and
Right.
that is the one thing that our judges are very, very good about. They don't want any juror to be uncomfortable or embarrassed or put in an odd situation. So they try very, very hard that at any time a juror needs to discuss something with them, that they can come up in a private setting.
Some jurors will wind up being excused.
Correct. And a lot of times jurors are actually deferred. The panel usually thinks that somebody's been excused. Somebody may come up and they've got a work trip that has already been paid for, and they're supposed to leave out on Tuesday, the next day. Well, we can excuse them for that week, and we just defer them to another term to come back. Situations, people are going to have surgery or illnesses, situations with children, jobs, anything that is a very good reason, that's a conflict, a time conflict, then we defer them to another term. Granted, we also have people that call in advance, people in nursing homes who can't, there's no way they can come down to serve on a jury. Then we go ahead and they send in medical documentation, and we go ahead and excuse them. People have moved. We get a lot of that where people have moved outside of Houston County, and the mail was forwarded to their new address, and so we have to excuse them.
And what you're left with is the group of jurors who will then be sent to the different courtrooms where trials are taking place. And Aaron and I are in a courtroom getting ready to try a case, and we hear them call for a panel. And then you send a panel of jurors to that courtroom from which a jury will be selected, right?
Correct. Out of the 625 that we call, we get it down to about 200 jurors that will serve for the week. Whichever judge calls first and tells me, I want 37, I want 34, however many that judge wants, I start counting and block that panel and send it to the judge.
Well, and Carla, I know one of the things that you and your office do at that time, when that panel is sent in, I know that you bring in an occupation list. So I guess that's compiled that morning when they all report for service.
Correct. When they get there that morning and they get checked in downstairs, they hand me back their summons. And on their summons, they have completed the information concerning their occupation, their spouse's occupation, and that kind of stuff. And we compile that into a report to be able to help the attorneys to be able to select a jury that's best for the case that they are trying. It helps everyone involved, because then y'all are not having to ask those questions and take up time and the information publicly put out there in front of everyone. You've got it all compiled in a document. So we take those summons, and I have 4 employees that the first hour and a half that they're there, they start inputting all of that information. So when jurors get there at 8 o'clock, by 9:30, when it's time to start striking a jury, everyone already has the occupation of all 200 of those jurors.
Would it be fair to say your staff is scrambling?
We are scrambling. We are typing as fast as we can to input all of that information. And, you know, if you stop and look at it, that's 4 employees doing nothing but inputting that information for an hour and a half. So you've got almost a whole day's worth of work of one person just to produce that report.
Sure.
So that's why I was saying with the cuts that we are looking at, that is something that 4 people could be working on. It's like saving a whole day's worth of work by not producing that report.
Sure. Well, and David mentioned that during that jury selection process that the attorneys would ask the jurors questions, and I know, Carla, you talked about the judges asking questions to just kind of generally qualify people for service, and that, you know, the jurors would have an opportunity to come forward, and, you know, nothing that anybody asks is designed to get into personal, private nature. And, you know, for the most part, it's the same holds true with the questions that the lawyers ask. Again, like you said, they're just simply trying to find the jurors that would be the best and most fair for that particular case. And again, it does sound like that everyone is going to have to work together to kind of keep the process going. And it's something that I think in some ways we do take it for granted a little bit, because for the most part people don't wake up each day and think that they're going to have a reason to file a lawsuit, or for that matter be sued and have to go into court. But you know, one thing that we want to express to the public, and, you know, just kind of have everybody keep in mind, that the court system, the law, is basically set up for, you know, for the public. It's, you know, by the people, for the people. And I mean, isn't that essentially what your office is there
Exactly.
for?
We are there. In fact, I tell my employees every day, y'all do not work for me. You work for the people of Houston County. And that's who we serve. And that's who the court system serves. And it's to be able to help victims and help plaintiffs to make them whole again. And it's also to help defendants to make sure their rights are not violated, and that anything that they're accused of, that they have an opportunity to come forward and protect themselves.
Give their side.
Give their side, exactly. So it's for everybody. And, you know, I tell my employees that are in my offices that every person that walks through that door, you need to make sure that could be you standing on the other side of that desk, and that these are people's lives that are affected. In parents, it's children. In domestic cases, it's a judge having to decide where these children are going to live. And we're dealing with people's lives, we're dealing with people's money, and we're dealing with people's freedom. And those are three things, in my opinion, you don't take for granted and you don't mess with. You make sure you've got everything in line, because you can't get any of that back.
Well, that's a real good point, Carla. You know, I've noticed that the judges, when it's jury term, are very, very concerned about the jurors. They don't like to keep the jurors waiting.
Correct.
They like to move things along. And so your staff is really under a lot of pressure on jury term week.
Correct.
The attorneys are under a lot of pressure. The judges want to make sure things move along. And I wanted to ask you one more thing about jury selection. Many people may think that they get chosen to be on a jury. Is that true?
No.
Tell the viewers how that really works.
What actually happens is I may send the judge 37 or 35, 34, however many he wants, and based upon the type of case it is. And once everyone gets up there and all the questions go through, then at that point, the attorneys sit down with the clerk and you start striking. And the state always goes first, and the state may say, you know what, I don't think this person fits the criteria and fits the mold of the type of juror I'm looking for this particular case. So I'm going to strike them off. So they call out the juror's number and they're marked through. Then the defense goes through and they go, you know what, I don't think this person is who I would like. So they call out that number and it's marked off, and it goes back and forth and ping pongs back and forth until you have 12 people left. And at the end of those 12, that's your jury. Now, the most interesting thing is our judges are very good because jury trials are very expensive. You never know what might happen with a juror. It could be a case that's 2, 3, 4, 5 days long, and somebody gets sick, somebody have a death in the family, somebody has an emergency that they just can't get back. And so our judges always keep alternates. So the last 1 or 2 or however many alternates they have, of those that are struck, are actually put back onto the panel. And I very, very seldom see any cases that we don't have at least one alternate juror on there, so that if something happens, You don't have to start all over again and retry everything. You have that person that can step in for that juror.
I guess you have some funny stories, things that you've seen through the years with
yes.
respect to juries.
Oh, yes. Probably one of the most memorable stories that I have is a couple of years ago. An elderly lady, she does not drive. She lives a couple of miles from the courthouse. It was the middle of January. It was 19 degrees outside. I remember that morning. The coldest I think Houston County's ever seen. And this little lady walked from her house to the courthouse because she was called for jury duty. This lady was in her 80s. Just before she got up to the steps of the courthouse, she fell, and an attorney saw her fall, helped her get up, and got the information from her and found out that she was there for jury duty and said, oh, well, I can go in and get you excused. We can talk to the judge. We can go in and see the clerk. And she's like, no, I have to go in there. So the attorney helped her on into the courthouse and brought her before me. She hands me her summons, and she is adamant that it is her duty to serve, and it is a privilege for her to be able to serve. And I just looked at this lady because so many times I have people just dreading their jury service, and it's just such a, an obligation, and it's almost like a punishment that they're going to have to be down there to serve. And I looked at this lady, and I was just so fortunate to even be able to speak with her about this, and I explained everything to her, explained to her that we had plenty of jurors. I appreciated her coming down there. And I asked her, I said, do you think you hurt yourself, and would you rather not serve? She said, I don't think I can, but I needed to come down here. So we went ahead and excused her, and we had someone to I found someone to be able to take her back home. But, it just made such an impression that it is our civic duty, and something that I'm a big proponent that everybody needs to do at least once.
Sure. Yeah, and David and I agree with you in everything that you said regarding how important the cases that come through the court system are, how they directly impact their lives, and that jury service is basically the foundation of our judicial system.
Exactly.
And it is just so very important.
And inevitably, when we start on Monday morning, I've got a lot of long faces that I'm looking out there, and I try to tell everybody we're going to make this just as painless as possible and make your wait time, keep it to a minimum, respect those jurors' times. By the end of the week, it never fails. Not a week goes by that I don't have jurors telling me, you know what, I'm glad I did this. I was dreading this. I was not looking forward to this. This was just something I did not want to do, but I'm glad I did it. I learned an awful lot about what happens at the courthouse and how important what y'all do is. And so, it's always to me very rewarding to hear that and to make such an impression on people, and people realize that if it's not for that juror, our judicial system does not work.
Well, and it really is a privilege. I think you would all agree that to be able to do the kind of work that we do day in and day out. Wouldn't you agree with that, David?
Well, absolutely. I think the jury system is the greatest system in the world, and jurors are smart. You get 12 sets of eyes, 12 sets of ears. They'll see things that the lawyers don't see, that the judges don't see, that nobody thinks about. Have you seen that?
Oh, yes, it's amazing. And what the other trend that I'm seeing is, I can't remember the last verdict that was reached that we didn't have a jury come out and ask a question and want to know just a little bit more, and making sure that they have the difference between, say, a domestic violence third and a domestic violence second, to make sure they've got the right charges and that the elements have been met. And it's interesting, years ago, I can remember we had a jury of all women, but you don't see that a whole lot. And I remember a particular judge saying, oh, it's going to be a hung jury. We're never going to get 12 women to agree on anything. And lo and behold, they went out and they fought and they went through everything. And they were only out about 20 minutes, and they came back with a verdict, and it was great. And we were all excited, and everybody went home, and justice was served. But yeah, and it's amazing what the jurors come back and they ask or they see or they pick up on. And I'm sure y'all found as attorneys that you never know what you bring up makes that impact.
Sure.
Right. What about in civil cases? Do you see juries being as attuned? Do they come back and ask questions?
probably actually more in civil cases because it's so gray. In a criminal case, the evidence a lot of times is black and white. If you've got DNA evidence, if you've got fingerprint evidence, if you've got a confession. But in civil cases, granted there's a car wreck. Everybody saw there's a car wreck, you've got damage to the car, people are hurt. Then comes the question as to, well, we have found in favor of the defendant, but now how much money? And everybody's got their different thoughts and opinions about money.
In favor of the plaintiff.
In favor of the
Yeah.
plaintiff, correct.
So would you agree that in an instance like that, that the lawyer for the injured person could really make a difference?
A huge difference, exactly, and how they present it, mannerisms and words, and the whole picture is taken into account, and that's what jurors really, really look at.
And Carla, you brought up a great point, and David, I think you just reiterated it. And it sounds like what you found is, even when they say, okay, this wreck happened, and we agree we found for you, plaintiff, but you have to quantify and prove what your damages are.
Exactly.
They're not just going to award some big windfall of money without any kind of proof or evidence to show why they should pay that, or
Exactly.
to actually demonstrate. And that has to be done oftentimes with expert testimony and exhibits, and just like you said, the whole presentation to show how directly it's impacted that person.
Right, because you're looking at not only their medical bills, but their loss of wages and loss of being able to provide for their family and do for their family. If it's a housewife and she can't go and physically take her children to school. So the services that are within the household, so a jury has to weigh all of that, and they have to, for lack of a better word, put a price tag on what that means. And that is often very, very difficult to do, and especially to get 12 people to agree on that price. And that's where the attorneys, it's so important with what the attorneys do and how they present it to that jury. And that's what takes into account, the attorneys take into account when they select a jury, that juror's background and the things that they do and their livelihood to be able to get a good, fair juror for both sides.
Carla, in the face of these hard financial times impacting the clerk's office, have you been able to do anything to save some money?
We've done a lot of things. We've cut everywhere we possibly can. And speaking about jury things, we have actually reduced our juror expense per trial by 2/3 since 2007.
That's remarkable.
That is a huge difference. And part of that is because we are reusing jurors. We are being very cost conscious of our trials, things going to trial that need to go to trial, and using as few jurors as we possibly can and calling them. So that's something I'm very, very proud of the cost saver of jury expenses and being aware of that is taxpayers' dollars and the people's money.
We want to thank you and commend you and your staff for the excellent work that you do for the people of Houston County. And again, thank you for being here.
Thank you. It is actually my pleasure to serve the people of Houston County and work with a great group of attorneys and judges.
To submit legal questions you may have, email to aaron@hoggartlandlawfirm.com. Thanks for watching. This has been a production of the Hogg & Gartlan Law Firm and WDFX-TV, Fox 34.
The Legal View with Hogg and Gartlan.